Hey guys, today's yet another project. My relatively new to me John Deere 1050. The hydraulics have gotten kind of slow and tired, so I did some research and a few tests, and it looks like it's probably the hydraulic pump. So the pump is down in here, the return and the feed pipes, and it's bolted by 4 bolts to the timing cover. Believe it or not, I searched Craigslist and I found a guy who had one for sale. Went over and picked it up, and I got it for a price that it's worth the gamble to see if it's gonna take care of the problem or not. He swears that it's a good pump, as they all do, and it's the correct pump. So we're going to swap this out and see if it cures our hydraulic woes. Now, the first thing that I did is I cleaned everything up because I may have to reuse some of the fluid, which is, I know, a huge no-no. And down here, I taped a clean new trash bag to the axle where probably some of the fluid is going to run off to. And then in my drain pan, I put another clean new trash bag taped so it doesn't blow around, and hopefully no particles are going to wind up in there. I'm going to run it through a strainer regardless, and if I have to use it, I know there's 2 filters on this system, so I should probably be okay with the precautions that I'm taking, but keeping my fingers crossed. So the first thing I need to do is I'm going to take off these pipes, and on each pipe there's 3 bolts, and they're 10 millimeter, 3 on top, 3 on bottom. So I'm going to get those off and see if I can move the pipes out of the way without doing too much else. Trying to do as little as possible on this. So hang in there. When I get them off, I'll be back. Okay, so I got the 6 bolts out of the pipes, and I was pretty sure that these were O-rings, so I don't have to worry about a gasket there. However, I'm a little worried about the gasket that connects the pump to the timing cover. I think that's an O-ring as well. I've never done one on this model tractor, so we'll find out shortly. I tied the pipes up to this loader frame to try and keep them high, so my fluid loss was as minimal as possible. And I did have to take off the mount that goes down here to the transmission, which is basically 2 12 millimeter bolts, and that allowed me to pull the pipes away from the pump and raise them up to tie them off again so that my fluid loss is minimal. So now we're gonna take off the 4 bolts holding the pump on, and hopefully I can fit my fat hands in there with the radiator shroud and everything else in the way. But we'll see what happens, and we'll be back. Alright, so I finally got the 4 bolts out. Shed a little blood in the process. I'm sure that if I would have taken out the radiator, it would have been tons easier. But then I would have had to deal with the cooling system, antifreeze, refilling it, the fan, the belt. That just would have been a mess. So we opted for the painful way, and I was able to do it. Now, hopefully, I can squeeze it out of here once I get it off, and it's a paper gasket. That sucks. Okay, so I can squeeze it out of here, I think. It's the adapter, you don't want to lose that. Boy, that's a tight fit, boy. I run into this all the time at work with our engineers. They really don't care about the people that have to work on it in the future. Yeah, boy, if they'd have made this half an inch, and it wouldn't have been a problem, because this is doing nothing but holding up the radiator. So if I can't get this out of here without pulling that, I'm not going to be a happy camper after suffering through getting this unbolted with everything in place. And boy, it is so close. And I swear I'm going to have that rooster for dinner. Amazing, I swear. I don't want to do anything stupid trying to get this out. Although I've been known to do stupid things in the past. Right there's the best chance. So we may need to get a speaking of stupid things, we may need to get a pry bar in here just to see if I can move this radiator support a quarter of an inch out of my way. So let me do that. I'll be right back. And boy, this pry bar here has gotten me out of more trouble than pretty much anything. And you know what? That's tighter than a gnat's ass stretched over a doorknob. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. Okay, so I'm all ready to go back together, except for the fact that the gasket that mates the pump to the block, or the timing housing, is a paper gasket. And I swear I had a roll of that around somewhere, but I can't find it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this piece of, I guess it's cardboard, from the back of a notebook. So I'm going to make that gasket, cut it out of this. It's darn near the exact thickness. So let me get on this and see how it turns out. Okay, so I got the gasket made, and there's really no pressure on it. It's just to keep oil from drizzling past. So honestly, I can't even remember if I mentioned that it's the back of a notebook, the cardboard that I used. And I know for sure that'll work fine. But I'm going to make sure that I've got all the gasket material cleaned off of the timing cover to give it the best chance possible of sealing. And most of it stayed on the pump itself, so I'm not really concerned about this, but I'm going to do it regardless. As I said, I want to make sure I have the best chance of creating a positive seal. I really don't want to be dealing with an oil leak. That will drive me insane. Oh, I was able to get that pump out without getting monstrous on it. I finally figured out the puzzle. And it kind of, right up here, you kind of got to spin it the right direction and it will come past. So I take back what I said about the engineers. No, I don't. They've done countless atrocities to the people who repair these things. Cars, trucks, motorcycles, ATVs, it doesn't matter. They don't care about it once it's in place and fits. And just a heads up, the bolts that mount this, I always brush these up and then put a light coat of oil on them so that I can spin them in by hand as far as possible. Last thing I want to do is be dealing with in 32nd of a turn on a wrench on 4 bolts for 2 days. So clean them up, put a light coat of oil on them, and they should spin in really easy by hand. So I'm going to finish cleaning this up, and then I'm going to start reinstalling everything. So let me say that if you're doing this particular model, probably the 850, maybe the 750 are going to be the same. This bolt, if you're doing it the way I'm doing it without pulling the radiator and all that, you need to keep this bolt in here, because once it's in place, you're not going to get it in. So you want to do this one first. It's going to hit the radiator if you don't put it in beforehand. Okay, so now we have the pump bolted back in, and I'm going to go over a couple of tips, and I'm going to show you what tools I used to get this done. So I'm going to put the pipes back on, and I really lost, I'll bet you not even a quarter cup of fluid, but that's okay because I have some new fluid left. The filters were changed on this, the fluid was changed, still had the problem, so this was the next logical step. I checked the valves and so forth, and everything seemed to be okay, but the pressure was a little bit low, and I really think that this is the cause. It took 17 seconds from the bucket, for the bucket, to go from ground to full up, and according to, I have all the manuals for this tractor, and according to the manual for the loader, it's supposed to take 9 seconds. So it was darn near twice as long to get the bucket from ground to full raise. And I noticed it really was weak. It just needed attention. So let me get these pipes back on. I'll top off the fluid and we'll keep chugging along. Okay, it's all back together with the exception of the pipe spacers, which I'll do in a bit. A couple of things. I've got this piece of angle iron here. Do not rely on the hydraulics to keep the bucket from killing you. Make sure you've got something in place to protect yourself. In addition to that, I've got this 2x4 as a secondary safety measure. Again, do not rely on the hydraulics to keep from killing you. So now that it's all back together, I topped off the fluid. The fluid that they recommend, and I completely concur, is this. It's actually John Deere High Guard Low Viscosity. It costs a little more, but I do not recommend putting Tractor Supply or Walmart oil in the hydraulic system on these machines. So now we're going to fire it up, and you'll get to be here in case we have fluid squirting everywhere or something grenades, and you'll get to witness it right along with me. So let's check it out. As far as the torque on the bolts, there's 10 bolts altogether. 6 on the pipes and 4 on the pump. I do have the torque specs, however I could not get a torque wrench in there, so I basically just snugged them up pretty well, not over tightening them because it's into aluminum and you don't want to strip them, but I'll keep an eye on it and see how it looks. If there's any leaks, I'll recheck it with a wrench. We're going to let it warm up for a few minutes as they recommend to get the hydraulic fluid warm before we see if this is a success or not. I'll be back. Well, like I said, with the other pump on it, it was about 17 seconds to raise the bucket from ground to max height. I let it run for a few minutes. Check the fluid, we're all good to go. So let's time this, and you probably won't be able to hear my count, so you'll have to count to yourself probably. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, 121, 122, 123, 124, 125, 126, 127, It's roughly 8 or 9 seconds from ground to max height, which, as I said, is what the service manual states. So I think we gained an improvement, and yeah, it was worth it. It was definitely worth the work. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what tools it took to do this. Like I said, minimally, without pulling the radiator. And I was a tech for GM Chrysler for a lot of years, working at a dealer, and you learn how to shortcut everything, especially if you're on flat rate as I was. You do a good job, but you do it as quickly as possible. So let me get the tools together that I use, and I'll show you that. Okay, so believe it or not, this is all I used, with the exception of, and I forgot to bring it over, a gasket scraper or a razor blade, whichever you prefer to use, whichever you have, to clean the mating surface off the timing chain cover or the engine block, however you prefer to terminalize it. 12mm wrench, 10mm wrench, and it doesn't have to be this style. This is a combo 10-11, but the longer the better, and this is to get the pipes off. Another 12mm wrench. This is to get the bolts off of the pump housing itself. And you need 2 of them because the one pipe mount is a bolt and a nut, and it's double nutted, so they can lock it down. It doesn't vibrate loose. A 10mm socket. I have this snap-on real shorty, and this was for the pipes. And a 1/4 inch 12mm to get to the bottom 2 bolts on the pump, which are actually a pain in the neck. You can get 2 of them from the driver's side, so to speak, or the left side of the vehicle, and the other 2 from the right side. A wire brush to clean up the bolts so that when you put them back in, you can turn them all the way in by finger, and a little bit of oil to lube up the bolts that you're replacing. The gasket should be replaced with a factory gasket or real gasket material, but I didn't have any on hand. I know that I have some somewhere, I just couldn't find it. So I did the best I could, and I used the cardboard off the back of a notebook. As I said, it was about the same thickness, and since there's really no pressure in there, it's just a seal between the 2 components to keep engine oil from leaking out. I'm pretty confident I'll be good. Topped off the fluid with the JD high grade stuff, and it probably took me 2.5 hours total. It's the first time I've done one on this machine. I could easily do it in half that time now that I know where I'm going and what I need and so forth. But overall, I think that we've gained some improvement. It will lift the front wheels off the ground pretty easily, and before it really struggled to do that. So I'm glad I did it, and if you guys have any questions or comments or complaints, post them up and I'll reply. Enjoy your Sunday, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.